Hello. Oh, let's get this in here. Okay, so yesterday I said we might be stitching the cornucopia, but I changed my mind. I kind of tested out an idea that I was wanting to do yesterday, and it did not work how I was expecting it to. So I'm going back to the drawing board. So we're gonna stitch our red sunflower today and go from there. All right, so I'm doing mine in like reds. So I've got 150 and 3350, and then the center of it is going to be 3031, and then we're not going to do the very center, so we're going to do the petals and then this outer ring, and then we're going to do this center another day. Yes, that's the plan. All right. So let's start with our lighter pink and go from there. How did your outlining go? Is it looking how you want it to? I'm trying to decide. Use that later. Okay, so on these petals, I am going to use 4 strands. So I'm going to separate 4 and 2. Now, with 4 strands, I mean, with anything, as long as it's an even number, you can put your thread in your needle 2 different ways. You can use the 4 strands and then just keep your needle here and then have a tail. Or if you want to stitch with 4 strands, but you only have 2 left, you can double your thread over. So your needle is at the end of your, or in the middle of your thread, so it's here, and then it's doubled over, and then you just tie your 2 ends together, because then your working thread is 4 strands. So whichever way you want to do it will be great. I'm going to stitch with 4 strands in my needle for now, but I always save my 2 strands and either double them over or take 2 strands from the next piece of thread I cut, whatever way you want to do it. Okay, let me move this a little further back and then zoom in so I have some more space to stitch. Okay, so we're gonna do just these full petals in the light pink, and then the dark pink will do the darker pink. So what we're gonna do is I have a knot at the end of my thread, like usual. Pick a petal you want to start with. I'm actually gonna start over here. And go to the very tip of that petal. And we're just gonna bring it down to the middle. This is almost a satin stitch, but not quite. I like to call it a petal stitch or a leaf stitch, because of how we're manipulating the satin stitch. Okay, so now we have our point. Now you have to decide how pointed you want your petal to be. Okay, so if you want it a little bit more rounded like these are, then you'll want to come out a little bit further and down just a little. If you want them more pointed, then you'll be a little bit closer and down a little bit further, which I know looks very similar when you're putting your needle in your fabric, but it'll make a difference if it's like there or there. Let me zoom in just a tiny bit more. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if you come like here, whoops. If you come like right here, I'm just down and over a little. That's going to be more rounded versus if you come down and stay a little bit closer, this will be more pointed. So kind of keep that in mind just when you decide where to go in. And then I'm going to do this first stitch into this same hole. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep it pretty close and just down a little. And then I'm going to go stitch next to where I went down the last time. So the first one I went into the same hole, the second one I did next to it. Okay, we're going to do one more. This one, we want it to be rounded out, so I'm going to come up kind of under the stitch almost, up at an angle. Hold on, I've got a knot in the back. My thread is way too long. Oh, I was just pulling extra thread that was on my table. Okay, so I came up kind of at an angle, and then I'm going to go into this same hole that I made with my third stitch. So then we have it kind of fanned out a little bit on top without taking up too much room at the bottom. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So try and keep them pretty similar so you can kind of see I came up right there. So I'm trying to come up right in the same spot, just on the other side. And I'm going to go into the middle with that first stitch. And then we're going to go down and over a little. And we're going to stitch in the hole next to it. And then we're going to come up at an angle. Oh, I grabbed some thread. No, I didn't. Yeah, I did. Kind of come up at an angle. And then we'll go down in that hole we just barely made. There is one petal. I like to stitch one side and then the other, but you could also go back and forth. So do the middle and then do left and then right, left, right. I personally find it easier to do all of the left side and then go back and do the right side, or vice versa. Okay, so let's do another petal. This one's a little bit different because we have this overlapping one. So I'm still gonna come up in the middle, but instead of coming up where I should for the petal, I'm gonna stay on this straight line with the flower that's gonna overlap it. I'm still gonna go down in the center, but then the same thing, I'm gonna come up on that straight line. I'm going to create a new hole. And then this one won't come up on that line, so I'm going to still do kind of come up at that angle. And then use that same hole to come down in. Have a fuzzy on there. What do we think? Can we do this? I'm not going to do this whole flower because I don't think that you need to watch all of that, but I am going to do like 4 or 5, and then I'm going to do the back petals, and then we're going to do a different stitch for this center. So just so you know, if you're like waiting around to see what's next, if you're rewatching and you want to fast forward, I'll still talk about what I'm doing, but I won't really be teaching a new stitch until I get down to the center. It's taken me, I feel like, a little while to like get a really good routine down with these types of petals. I feel like everyone kind of does them differently. So if you have another way that you like doing them, or if you are experimenting and don't want to do it my way, like plenty of people don't use the same holes when they go down, and they just squish all of theirs in together at the bottom, which is totally fine. I find this is a way that I can get them to be like the most uniformed. But definitely if you have a different way you like to do them or want to do them, feel free. But I feel like this gets me the best like petal shaped without being too straight, and it doesn't give as much of a V shape at the top or like straight at the top. I still want my petals to be like rounded out. So this is my equation for that. I'm gonna zoom out just a tiny bit. I feel like it's like shaking. I don't use this color very often, and I don't know why, because it is so pretty. If you get a knot like that, just stop for a minute, and usually if you like pull, like I'm just pulling this working thread and loosen it and then just kind of like untie it. It's just because I have a really long piece of thread. And so it's like tangling up on itself. Okay, I think I'll do one more of this light pink petal, and then I'll go back in with the darker. And then we'll do the center. Now, the reason we're not going to do this middle is because I want to do French knots there, but I feel like French knots really need like a whole day dedicated to French knots versus like the end of a video. So, and we're going to do French knots over here as well. So we're just going to leave our center alone for now. And then we will finish it when we learn about French knots. So if you already know how to do French knots, that's what I'm planning on doing, but I'm not going to teach them today because I think they need more time than what we have available today. Okay, one more stitch over here. Yes, those are cute. Okay, let me tie this off really quick. And then create that loop. Sometimes I double knot it. And then I'm just gonna tuck my tail through some stitches and then trim it. Okay. Now we're gonna do the same stitch for the darker petals, but how we get them to lay nicely is what we're gonna be learning. So I'm gonna stitch with just 2 strands doubled over, so I still am working with 4, but just because I don't need as much thread this time. Okay, so I get my 2 strands, put it in my needle. Whoop. Of course, when I try to do it on screen, I can't. There we go. And then just pull that needle to the middle, bring our 2 ends together, and Okay. So that's how it looks. All right, so with this one, I'm not gonna do it first. Well, let's just start over here. Okay. So I'm gonna do the same thing, but instead of going down to the center, I'm gonna kind of slide my needle just so it's not all the way down, but I like to kind of slide my needle between so that it can be covered up. Because it doesn't need to go all the way down. Whoops. If you get kind of a funny thread, like it pulled funny, you can kind of see like it didn't pull all 4 strands. I'm trying to show you. You can see like these 2 strands didn't pull tight. So I like to just pull that back up and kind of run my needle over it a little and then pull it back down. All right, and then we're gonna do the same thing that we did last time. So we're gonna go at the top and then we're gonna go kind of, I'm not gonna go down to that same hole that I went in last time, but I am gonna go like under that stitch. So I'm gonna go down at an angle. And then I'm gonna only do 2 stitches on each side of the center. So the center and 2 more. And then I'm gonna do that same hole as the one above it. It's like the wrong angle, hold on. I'm like having a hard time seeing. Okay. Now, sometimes there's still like that gap right there, but if you get your needle very carefully, you can kind of fluff these up around it a little bit. Let's see. So I'm gonna go and kind of fluff those up so it covers a little bit better. I'll move over here and do our next one. Now this one has a bigger gap, like down to the center. So I'm gonna go all the way down on this one. It kind of just depends on, like this one doesn't have as much space between, but this one does. So you kind of just have to play with like the space that you have between your stitches. And sometimes I'll even pull this other one like pretty tight because I want it to be behind these stitches. So if you pull it a little bit tighter, it'll kind of pull down below those stitches that you already have. But I'm doing the same thing. I'm just gonna go underneath the stitches that I have in there. I'm at the wrong angle. Oh my gosh, I am having so many issues with this thread. One more. Okay, 2 more. Could also do these back ones first, I guess. Never never really thought about that until just now. Do them first and then the lighter on top. Okay, so I'm just gonna come in and stay on this straight line of this petal and just do some stitches into the middle so we can fill that space. But oh look, I think I only need 2 stitches into that same hole. Yeah, because then the other petal will go here. All right, what do we think? Let's do one more. Maybe do half and half, see which way you like better. If you like doing the outside first, or the back color, and then the lighter color. I only need 3. One more. Okay. Yes? Fun? Now, I'm gonna do the center the outer circle how I'm planning on doing it, but then I'm gonna take it out and finish my petals. Don't do the center until you're done with all of your petals. I just don't want you to have to watch me for that much time before I can do my center. So finish your petals before you do your center, because it will be harder to do the center, to do your petals if you have your center done already. Okay. So we've got our 30-31. All right, I'm gonna stick with the 4 strands for this whole flower. Hold please. Cutting thread. Getting it in my needle. Okay, we are gonna do a stem stitch on this outer ring. I have started to just absolutely love doing stem stitch flowers. I just think they turn out so fun. So any like round shape, you could do a stem stitch flower. But we're gonna do it as the center. So the biggest reason why you wanna do your petals first is we're gonna use these same holes for our stem stitch. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come up in these holes that we created with our petals so that everything stays connected. So a stem stitch is, we're gonna go up and down. We're gonna take, I mean, you could do smaller stitches if you wanted, but I wouldn't do any bigger than that. Maybe even there. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep our, let me zoom out. We're gonna keep this thread. We're not gonna pull it tight. We're gonna keep our loop on the outer ring of our circle, okay? So always on the outer ring. So we're not gonna complete that stitch yet. We're gonna come up in the middle. So we came up in A, down in B, up in C. And then we're gonna pull that snug. Okay, so now our second stitch will be from this center over. So this stitch here from A to B is gonna be the same length as it is from C to D. Okay, so this stitch length is the same as this one that comes up in the center to this center. gonna keep our thread, our loop on the outside ring, and then we're gonna come up in B. So where we went down the first time is where we're gonna come up this time. Okay, so that's another completed stitch. So we're gonna go forward like a half stitch from the end. We're gonna come up in that stitch where we ended last time. Keep our loop on the outside edge of our circle and pull it snug. Now it might look a little bit funny in the beginning, but once you get stitching, hold on. Once you get stitching, it all turns out. I pulled up some of my tail from my knot, which is why people don't like knots, but that pulls out easily, so. Okay, so we're gonna go another stitch length, and we're gonna come up where we've already gone down and pull it snug. Now, when I'm pulling it snug, I pull it backwards. I don't pull it to where I'm going to be stitching. I'm pulling it where I've already stitched before. I feel like that helps it lay a little flatter than if I pull it the other way. So I always pull towards where I've already stitched. So the loop is here and I'm pulling like backwards. So this kind of creates almost like a rope. Now, if you don't like this stitch or you don't like how it's looking, you could also just do the whole thing as French knots and just do darker French knots on the outer ring and then lighter French knots in the middle. But do you notice as I'm working around the circle, this loop always stays on the outer edge of the circle? Always, always, your loop should be on the outside of your circle or on the inside, one or the other, but keep it that way. I like it on the outside because then it twists out instead of in. And so it, creates a nice like stitch between the petals and the center. Like if you're twisting and your loop was on the inside, then it would be like twisted in versus twisted out. This is a good stitch. If you have a hoop stand, this is a good one to use in a hoop stand because then you can use both hands very easily to hold things out of the way. Okay, we are almost to the end and then I'll show you how we're gonna keep going. Okay, so I'm gonna go down in that same hole that we very first came up in. And then now when I go down, I'm just gonna go down on the next circle, like the next part. So this will end up being like a spiral, not because we're not going to spiral all the way to the center, but we'll spiral like 2 or 3 times depending on how thick you want this to go. But we'll just start the next row. So when we come up here, we're creating a new hole. Like we haven't stitched there yet, so, but then you'll just keep going. And you want it fairly close to that first one so that you don't have like gaps between your like rows. So you could just do one circle and then fill it in with French knots. You could do 2 circles and then fill it in with French knots. You could do 3. I mean, you could do whatever you wanted. You could fill in the whole center like this and don't do French knots in the middle if you want. You have a lot of options with what you want to do. I think I'll probably just do 2 rounds and then do French knots. But anyways, that's how you do it. It's a little bit harder when I have a camera. I can't see quite what I'm doing. Anyways, I think you get it. But so then if you're going to do a 3rd round, then when you get up here, you'll go down in that same spot where you first came up and then start your next row next to it and create that 3rd row. It's almost like an eyeball right now. All right, I'm going to let you go and do the rest on your own. I will work on this and then I'll post it to my stories once I have it completed so you can see it all done, minus the French knots. We'll do these. We can't do this until we do the pumpkin, so it will be a little bit, but you can just leave that open until we do French knots, and we'll do that when we do these. So, all right, enjoy the rest of your day. I will be back tomorrow. We will stitch something. I'm gonna try the cornucopia again and see if I can get the stitch to look how I want it to. So, might be that, might be something else. It'll be a surprise. All right, see you back here tomorrow. Bye.